Welcome to everybody to today's session of Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a Conversation Circle, in which we really do seek to have a very full conversation amongst all of us that brings out each of our inner wisdom, which our rich lives have bestowed upon us so generously. And we always have someone to give us a keynote little talk, get our minds and our hearts warmed up, our souls ready to engage in this conversation. We have the theme this week of exceptional calm. And our speaker is exceptionally qualified to speak on this theme. He's someone who I've always seen exemplify that kind of calm. His name is Ramdas Lamb. He is a religious studies teacher at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and he has a long and deep spiritual tradition that he has followed to the extent that he was a sadhu in India within a very rigorous monastic order for almost a decade before coming back here to Hawaii. And so he knows whereof he speaks. And we're very fortunate to have him with us today. So Ramdas, thank you for being here.
Thank you. So I was thinking earlier today about this, and how to kind of approach it. And I was taken to my trip to India. I hitchhiked from Europe to India. And I just knew I needed to get to India. I didn't have as much money as I thought I was going to have. I was actually owed some money. I didn't get it. But I got as far as Europe, and so I was going to hitchhike. And I met a guy at the youth hostel in Athens. And we decided to travel together. And hitchhiked across Turkey, Iran, through Afghanistan. And I had gotten sick in Turkey, and I had ended up getting dysentery. And it was because I had become a vegetarian at that time, and the only food that was available was white rice and dirty water. That's all I was able to get. Until then, I just couldn't eat anything. For several weeks as we were traveling, I kept getting weaker and weaker and got as far as Pakistan. And I always noticed that John had told me about his life, and he had lived in a very comfortable life. We were not in a comfortable situation traveling at all. And yet he was able to deal with it. I had been homeless. I knew I had been able to live that kind of life a little bit easier. And then we got as far as Pakistan, and we were both really kind of feeling it. And he said, you know what, we're just going to go to a hotel. And I went, where are we going to get the money to go to a hotel? And he pulls out this little red card that says American Express on it. And he says, I can use this to get money. And I said, really, what is it? He said, it's a credit card. I had never heard of a credit card. This is 1969, right? I'd never heard of a credit card. I had no idea what he was talking about. And he said, we'll just go to American Express. My dad put money in the bank, and it was American Express. And he told me anytime I need money, just to take the card there. He took the card there, he got money. We went to a hotel that was air conditioned because it was 110 degrees outside. And all of a sudden everything changed. And I realized the reason why I had never seen all the worry and the stress in him is because he had a secret. He had a secret source. And that secret source is what made it easy for him to live. As a sadhu, that's what I was taught. We all have that secret source. And what is it? That's the well of consciousness within, right? And so what is a well? A well is where we get the water of life, right? And so, but there's a well of consciousness within us. But too many of us don't realize that we have it. And so we're stressed. There's no Sanskrit word for stress, right? There's a Sanskrit word for worry, but there's actually no Sanskrit word for stress, and they're two very different things. Why? Because fundamentally, if we realize that we always have that well within that we can draw from, there's never a reason to be stressful. And then calmness can come. So in my monastic order, we are always taught to do, I mean, you mentioned we do a lot of austerities, you do a lot of intense practices, but you do the intense practices knowing all along that you don't have to do them. You can stop them whenever you want. But you're doing them because why? I want to get access to that well. I want to get more ready access to the well. And that's the whole, and what do we call that access to the well? Devotion. That's what bhakti is devotion to the divine, is seeking the source. And that source is that well of consciousness within us. And so all the practices that we would do knowing that we're simply doing them out of choice. All the things that are in our life is out of choice, knowing that ultimately God's in control. And if God's in control and I'm God's child, there's nothing ever that's going to go wrong. Everything will be exactly the way it's supposed to be. So Tulsidas writes, Rama kinahi chai soy hoy, karaho anyata asanakoy. Whatever Ram wants to happen, whatever the divine wants to happen, it's going to happen. And we don't have any choice. And therefore, sing and play every day without seeing Lord Ram don't pass away. Right? It's that approach that we know that there is that divinity, that presence, that consciousness that is always there. Meister Eckhart said, God is the true home. It's us who go out for a walk, right? We have to, if we really want peace, if we really want calm, we have to realize that it actually is always there for us. It's not that we have to find it. We simply have to open our eyes to see it. But those are the inner eyes. Because when we open the outer eyes, we see duality. And therefore, why does Shiva have a third eye? So when Shiva's third eye opens up, the two eyes close and the third eye opens up, because the third eye represents oneness. The two eyes are duality, right? Good and bad, right and wrong, you and I. The one eye is oneness. And so when our two eyes, when we stop seeing duality and we only see divinity, then we have calm, then we have peace, then we have the awareness within. Kabir, a main disciple of Ramananda, so in our order, Kabir talks about the four Rams. And he says, Eka Rama Dasaratha Keveta. So one Ram is the son of Dasaratha. That's in the Ramayana, right? So your beautiful image behind you, Renee, right? Of Ram and Sita and Lakshman. So that Ram, Eka Rama Dasaratha Keveta. So one Ram is the incarnation. And then the next he goes, Eka Ram Gata Gata Meberta. One Ram sits in the heart. So what's that? That's the individual soul. So that Ram is always within us. So Muhammad said, Allah is closer to you than your jugular vein. So what does that mean? If the jugular vein is already inside, it's even more inside. So the presence of the divine is always there with us. We can never be apart from it, except in our consciousness. Except in our awareness. We're not aware that it's there, but it's always there. So then Kabir goes on to the third one and he says, Eka Ram Sabse Pyara. One Ram is the beloved of all. And that's when we begin to realize that God, that the divine, that eternal presence is really the greatest connection that we have. That is what makes our lives the most meaningful, is that connection with that loving spirituality, that loving divinity within us that always cares for us. And when we have something that someone some entity, that cares for us to that degree, is there ever a reason to worry about anything? No. And then Kabir goes on to say, Ekaram Jagat se pasada. And then one Ram is beyond all of that, beyond our ability to even conceptualize. So, but what he's saying is that we can conceptualize the divine however we want. So they talk about in the Vaishnava order. That's what I was kind of talking about today, right? About the Vaishnava concepts of spirituality, is that you can have different relationships with the divine. One is as a lover, one is as a friend, one is as a master, one is as a child, and then one as presence, right? And that to know that the divine is always with us is to be in love with every moment and with everything and with every experience, because it's all a different way that the divine is making itself known to us. Al-Halaj, the Sufi, says, none live in this cloak but Allah. So the idea that if the greatest source of power, much more power than an American Express card, right? The greatest source of power is always right here. What is there to worry about? I can remember so many times as a sadhu, I would be in situations where life would, things would get difficult. But my teacher would always say, Chinta mat kar. Never worry, never worry. He says there's never anything worth worrying about. The only reason we worry is because we don't have our eyes open, our inner eyes open, to see the presence always there with us, always caring for us, always guiding us in everything that we do. And there's no reason to worry anymore. And so, but that's a practice that we have to do because we're constantly forgetting, right? So like Meister Eckhart said, God is always there. It's us who goes out for a walk, right? It's us who forget and we're looking elsewhere. But it's always right here. They talk about the musk deer in India. And they say that the musk actually comes from the navel of a deer. And they say that the deer goes out searching and searching, or it's a buck, I think, goes out and searching for where is that amazing smell coming from, but it's right here, right? And they never know it, and they're always searching for it, and it's right here within them. And that's what we're searching for. We're constantly searching in life for things that will make me calm. In Hindi, there's this yadi to, if then. If I get a good job, then I'll be happy. If my kids get a good, go to a great school, then I'll be happy. If my husband or my wife have a great job, then I'll be happy. If someone does this, then. And so we live in a world of if and then, if and then, if and then. And that is the problem, is that we're always postponing happiness, always postponing contentment. Calmness comes with contentment. And so what does Patanjali tell us in the yamas and the niyamas? In the niyamas, Sauch, cleanliness, santosh. Right? The second part of the yama, or the niyama, is santosh. And what does that mean? Contentment. Samtosh. Sam means good. And the word tosh, and this is, of course, this is folk etymology of this term, but tosh means hard. Something that is hard is tosh, right? So something that's very hard, they say that's tosh. Samtosh is good and solid. So if we understand samtosh as good and solid, that's when we can be content, right? I'm content. All is good. Why? I'm solid. I'm solid. We're good. Where does that come from? The inner. because that's where our solidity is from. That's where our solidity is grounded, and it's grounded in a beautiful way. And so in doing yoga, Santosh is such an important thing. It's remember the yamas and the niyamas. We have 5 and 5. So we have the kind of the 10 yogic commandments, right? And Santosh is such an important thing. And then after Santosh is tapa, austerity, right? So we do our austerities, but always be content. Always be solid with it. Whatever you're doing, be solid with it. And you do your austerities knowing that you are grounded. And that's why you can do them, because you're grounded. And what are you grounded in? You're grounded in that well of consciousness that we live with every moment, and that nourishes us, and that gives us strength, and that gives us awareness. So there's nothing to worry about. So we have to move beyond the adito, right? The if then, because that we can never be calm if our world is based on if then. So they say, instead of yadito, say abitik. In other words, it's good now. We're good now, right? And that's content. So contentment can bring calmness, but contentment comes from solidity, and solidity comes from awareness, and awareness comes from knowledge of that well of consciousness that is actual my reality. It's not something different than me. It is me. And so if I can draw constantly from that well in everything that I do, then I'll always be calm. There'll never be a reason to worry about anything. You just live your life. My brother was an actor. And as an actor, he would be sometimes a good person, and sometimes he would be a bad person. One time he was a homeless person, another time he was a crook. And we would talk about it, and he says, it's easy to do because you know none of them is you. It's all just a game. Life is just a play. And so what do we call it? Leela, right? Leela is the divine play. It's not real. All the things that we see around us are not real. The only thing, so Tulsidas writes, all that is real is divinity. There is nothing else but divinity. And if we understand that all that there is divine and divinity, then there's no reason to worry about anything. So then we just play, right? And then it does become a play, and then it becomes a leela, and then we can act however we want to act. But then if you're going to act, you're going to act in ways that are good, because if you have that consciousness and you have that awareness of love and beauty and compassion, then what play are you going to act in? A play of love and beauty and compassion, because you realize that's the best play. That's the most fun, right? Because everybody wins in those situations. So I was talking to Renee earlier, just as we were beginning. In my monastic order, there is a group that calls themselves Ram Snehis, which means lovers of Ram. And they believe that all creation is feminine. And because all creation is feminine, even if you have a male body, you're feminine. And so they dress, sometimes they will dress in saris. And sometimes they will wear regular sadhu clothes, except for the time that they're doing their rituals. And then they'll kind of take a lungi and they'll put it over their head, kind of like a sari. Sometimes they'll wear bangles. But the idea that all of creation is feminine, because the creative power is feminine. And so as I was mentioning in the Adhyatma Ramayana, where Sita says, I am the creative power and I am creation. And so if we look at that way, then everything we are all that is created is the divine feminine. It's the divine mother. We are not only from the divine mother, we are a part of the divine mother. So David was talking about Mother Earth, the creative mother. We are all a part of it. Everything that we are is that creative beauty that we call feminine. And that's the first manifestation of the non-dual, right? But if we understand that, then the closer that we can get back to that love of the creation, which is our mother. We are a part of the mother. The entire creation is the mother. And the mother, the relationship with the mother is such an important thing. That's love, right? When we think of the mother, we think of love. How do we get that? We get that from that inner well of awareness. And so all the austerities, all the practices that we do only to bring us to that point of realizing that our inner self is the only truth. Nothing else is real in the sense of permanency. So if I say today, so Asa is right now in Japan. And if I say today, oh, today is Saturday, well, then she'd say, no, today's Sunday, right? So what is truth? It's all relative, right? But there is one truth that's not relative, the truth of my inner being. The truth of my inner being is permanent. That is truth because it never changes. Things that change are not truth, it's just they're relative. Right? I'm happy, I'm sad, it's night, it's day. Those are all changing things. But what is not change, does not change is the reality of the consciousness of which we are all a part. And the way we connect with that consciousness is through love. Through love of the self. And then when I realize that actually you and I are the same, then I have to love you as well. I can't love myself if I'm not loving you as well. Gandhi said, Gandhi said, I wanted to get liberated. That was my goal. My goal was just to get liberated. But the more I realized, the more I studied, the more I began to realize that everybody and I are the same. And so as a part of getting liberated is relating to everybody as equal to myself. And he says that's where devotion really comes from, is realizing that the divine that is in me is in the divine that is in everybody. And so to become liberated is to be connected with the entire reality. And then
that would make anybody pretty calm.
Yeah. When we know that all we need is right here in front of us, there is nothing we ever need. David, you had a question.
Well, it's more like an aha from, well, that beautiful message. You remind me of the story about the diamonds in the backyard, that we wander off looking for the diamonds elsewhere.
Yeah.
The aha I had, and I wanted you to reflect on it, is that it seems within us and also within the race, there's this tendency to, as you said, forget. And then we wander off the path and we start having desires. And I'm wondering, if it were all just divine consciousness and never had these disruptions and forgetfulness, would we ever evolve? So don't they somehow belong to one another, that we kind of have to?
Sure. Yeah, I once asked my teacher, because I remember when I first came back from India, and people would say to me, oh, you had a guru. Was he fully realized? Right? That was the big thing in the 70s and the 80s, and maybe it is today, I don't know. But if you're going to have a guru, he's got to be fully realized, or she has to be fully realized, whatever that meant. So I remember asking my guru once, I said, what does full realization mean? And he says, is there an end to the universe? If there's no end to the universe, there's no end to growth. There's no end to learning. There's no end to the divine, right? There is, don't put a limit on anything, right? Always learn, always grow, always expand. We are because life is a process. It's not a place. As soon as I think life is a place, I stop growing. Life is a process. Every moment is a new opportunity to see another aspect of divinity, another aspect of love, another aspect of compassion, to be put into practice.
I wonder what other people have to think about David's question. David, could you restate it? If what didn't exist, would we not have the way or the inspiration to evolve?
Well, I'm just curious because it does seem very human for us to seek outside ourselves.
Okay.
Even though we may have found an awareness at one point, we still forget and we wander off and we do foolish things that are off in the dual world. And I'm wondering, isn't that also just a part of the natural order? So
yes, I wonder what people have to think about that.
do I get to call on someone?
Yeah.
I call on Maurice.
How did I guess? I think there was mention of the third eye. I think, at least in the Theosophical tradition, one of the things that we bring with us all of our other many, many, many incarnations. And that includes, to make it simple, our incarnation, at least for some of us, from Atlantis. And that was the continent you've heard about that sunk, except for a couple places maybe. And the reason it did is that there was kind of a misuse of our abilities, our minds, and, and people did crazy things, and et cetera, et cetera. And the third eye closed. At least the Theosophical tradition says that. So now we have our two eyes with the hope that our pineal gland might open sometime for the third eye. And so that creates so we're very external because our two eyes, as I think was mentioned, right, are go out to the external. So in a sense, what we're trying to do here as a human race, not about any individual, although it involves all individuals, is to, by going inward, trying to begin to evoke something that at some point will progressively awaken our inner senses, our inner vision of the third eye. But as a result, most of us aren't really aware of that. So you could see a lot of people not being aware of anything that's a lot of what we're talking about here. So that's kind of my response partly to David's question.
I wonder if that insight that you're talking about, Maurice, which would be symbolized by that opening or awakening of the third eye within, is somehow related to that deep well that Ramdas was speaking of recognizing that within our own consciousness is this infinite source that we can always draw upon.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yeah.
I think the quote by William Quan Judge says that calmness is the one thing necessary for the spirit to be heard. And I think it's consistent with what Ramdas said, that we're all spiritual beings. I've heard it said that from the neck down is just packaging. That in fact, to be human is basically to be in touch with the spirit. And if calmness is one of the necessary things for the spirit to be heard, when we're calm, we're with the spirit. In other words, we are who we truly are.
Yeah.
But that takes a lot of discipline because of this externalization problem that we just spoke about.
Well, and I think that's why experiences of solitude, experiences of peace, of calm are really important for us. Thomas Merton said, in silence, God ceases to be an object, but becomes an experience. And we all need that. And when I teach my mysticism class, I used to, I do it to some extent, and I'm going to be doing it again in the springtime when I do it, is I have all my students keep 24 hours of silence just as a practice. Learn from it. You know, this is a science class. You're learning about the self and experience the self, because that is the most difficult thing. When I worked at the prison, if we had an inmate who was really intense and violent, you put them in a hole, which is basically silence, and you put them in a room where there are no windows, and there is just a 6 by 8 foot room with a bed and a toilet, and they are in there by themselves. And after 2 days, usually they will do anything to get out because the silence is too frightening for them. And that is a good tool. So when I would counsel them, I would say, why does it frighten you? It frightens you because you don't know yourself. If you know yourself, Gandhi was in prison for 13 years, and he said the most favorite time in prison is when they put him in solitude, because then he could just meditate. If we can't be with ourselves, how can we be with anybody else? Right? And some of my students have said that 24 hours of silence was probably the best learning experience they had for the entire semester, because it taught them something about themselves. You know, we can learn, and we can read Meister Eckhart, we can read Rumi, we can read a variety of different mystics. But then to actually experience solitude and experience calm and experience peace within, it can be frightening, but it should never be frightening, because that's who we're with. We're only with ourselves. And if we can't love ourselves, how can we ever love anyone else?
I met a man once when I was on a river rafting trip. He was the leader of the trip. He was a biologist who had been assigned to live with bighorn sheep for a year. And they only airdropped him in packages every couple months to make sure he had enough food to get by, and maybe a blanket or something. And that was absolutely the most difficult thing for him, was to be relatively by himself, except for with these sheep, and realized that he really did not like himself. Yeah. And to just get to that point of self-acceptance first, and then finally learning to be able to like or love himself. Yeah. And by the time that I had met him, he was somebody that you got a very authentic sense of calm from. Somebody who was content living in his own skin. I wanted Asa to maybe talk to us about any experiences she might have had along these lines.
Hi, thank you for this session. It's really nourishing for my soul. I have a dear one that's going through a very, very tough time, and everything you've been sharing, Ramdas, and everyone, just really, I feel a little emotional. Sorry. I feel, Renee, every time I see you online, there's something big going on in my life. So, well, for me, silence, I've had the opportunity to sit 3 Vipassana sessions of, 10 days full silence, pretty much. Except the teacher, you might exchange a few words. And each one has been life altering. And I had kind of sworn to myself, or had hoped that it would be an annual activity, but with life and with COVID and everything, it's become a little more challenging. But still, just knowing, I feel I got to taste what it means to really connect with that well. And I remember I was there for my 30th birthday the first time. I had just left Cirque du Soleil and performing, and on this quest to kind of get to know myself beyond the lights and the performing world. And my friend said, oh, there's this thing, you go in silence and it's great. And I had no idea what I had signed up for. I had no idea how difficult or challenging to face myself to that degree of 14 hours of meditation a day, and the other times of facing the self and just seeing what was inside of me. And there was a lot of pain, a lot of sadness, and a lot of also exaltation and bliss. And just looking up on the day of my birthday, turning 30, and just all I had was my shawl, and I had the clothes I was wearing, and I just looked up and said, what else? What could I want for? It's all now. It's this. I was just filled with such gratitude. And so I feel that I understand that it is within. And yes, as Maurice shared and David shared too, and Renee just talked about this sentiment, we do forget when we open these eyes often, but how can we continue to integrate all the processes of the shadow, of the pain that does exist on this human experience.
Reminded me of a monk I met who was blind. And there was this one teacher who I would visit every year. He lived in the Himalayas, in a different area of the Himalayas than I lived in. And I would go to visit him. And one time I was there was this blind monk that was there to visit him as well. And we got to talking, and I was there for a week. And so I would see him regularly. And I realized that he had cataracts, and his cataracts was the reason that he was blind. And at that time, there was some people who I knew who had started an organization called Seva Foundation, and they had a plane, and they would go to Nepal, and they would go to India, and they would do cataract surgeries on people. And I thought, perfect, I'll just get him in contact and get his sight back. And I mentioned that to him, and he said, not interested. And I went, why? And he said, God blessed me with inner vision. I don't need outer vision anymore. He realized that everything that he needed to see, he could see.
I do think that the question that David asked at the beginning remains relevant from the standpoint that there seems to be a purpose for us being born into this world of things, of being faced with all these quote unquote problems, difficulties, challenges. Without that, if we just remained in these, kind of angelic, floaty, beautiful realms, I mean, we might have this very blissful experience, but would we be evolving? Isn't it something about spirit coming into connection with matter, with this power of consciousness that we are endowed with as human beings, that somehow has a transformational effect on our own consciousness within, and also on everything that we interact with everything and everyone, potentially. That there's some message and meaning and purpose behind the difficulties that we go through. And we aren't going to be able to maintain perfect calm at all times, no doubt. I mean, because we are getting these challenges, so that it puts us back upon ourselves. Okay, can I remember those moments of clarity, those moments of really getting it and pull that into this very difficult and challenging situation. And there's something so noble about when we do that, right?
Hi, this is Veena. So I think that is the question that Gandhi gives the answer, what Ramdas was just talking about. It is the Ram Nam, the name of Ram, is the remedy that he calls it, that helps us not renouncing the world, not appreciating this experience, but experience in Ram, with Ram. Ram means Ramati iti Ramaha. The one is pervades all being, all world, all existence, all problems. And I think that's what I like about Ramdas's talk, that he talked about that mystical aspect, but then he brings to this world and saying that how we live in this world, how we act. And Ram's name makes it easier to wade through these challenges, to navigate this world. And according to Gandhi, whenever he was in the difficult situations, when he was so heartbroken, when he was so sad, so many things in life that he was so disappointed. And then came the Ram Nam remedy and gave the peace in his heart. And I think that's what is what David's words were, not denying the experience, but bringing it to this oneness of Ram, one of this divine reality, divine being, which is interconnected, interdependent, and all in us and around us. Then I think what Maurice was saying, then I don't think that Atlantis you have to worry about. It is the one eye that we have to find, that one eye within is the two eyes are with the eyes of Ram, then we can see oneness. Otherwise, we always see two-ness. So thank you, Ramdas.
I mean, that once again, if we understand the world as a process, not a place, then that means we're always growing. And so we are here to grow. And growth is an eternal process. It's not, there's no cessation. It's like my guru said, there's no end to the universe. There is no end to knowledge. There's no end to experience. And if we allow that, then every moment is a moment of beauty, of awakening. In my ethics class, we deal with animals. One of the issues was I have them read an article about cows, and they found that cows, when they know what parts of the cow's brain do things just like they know what parts are, and they'll actually put these things on the cows to kind of tap into to see what part of their brains are being activated. And they find that when a cow is able to open a gate, they get excited. Just the same way that we do when we learn something. It's go, oh, wow, look at that, I did it, right? And that's life. Life enjoys the process. All of life is learning. Plants are learning. They're adapting to their environment. If we think about that, every plant learns how to adapt to its environment. That's how they survive. Animals learn to adapt. We're the ones that adapt our environment to us. Animals adapt to whatever environment they're in. We try to adapt whatever environment we're in to us. And that's where we kind of get it wrong. And so if we can go back to being in the process of living in the world and adapting to that world, accepting it. You can't adapt to it until you accept it. We have to accept the world exactly the way it is. There's perfection. And we constantly have to learn to find beauty in that perfection, however it's manifest.
I wonder, for some of the rest of you, what are the things that help you to find that calm when you get thrown off your game, when you're not at your maybe level-headed, level-hearted best, but when you just really get thrown for a loop, what helps you to like restabilize, find that happy place within, or what is it for you, each of you, I wonder? Robin, I know you're working as a staff member, and we're so grateful for you to do that. If you put the square around yourself, we could let you talk, and you wouldn't have to be moving squares for a moment. Because I suspect you have some good insight on this.
So I think I mentioned to Renee earlier, I'm taking all of this in a different way, because I came onto my shift after just teaching a very luxurious and calm and delightful restorative yoga class, and I can't help but notice that I'm processing differently. And I guess I, as a yoga teacher, I put myself out of my brain, out of seeking the third eye, and I put myself squarely into my body. And, that may be base, that may be more animalistic, but that's the thing that helps me to get centered so that I can go back up.
What I hear when you say that, Robin, is that you are going out of that busy monkey mind that's always jumping around and trying to figure everything out and worrying about everything. And by finding a way to engage the body, sometimes you're able to let go of that busy brain and get to a calmer state of consciousness.
I would say also a more receptive state, a more accepting and contented, talking about, being satisfied with what we have. For some reason, for me, the moments where I'm more connected to my physicality are the times when I experience santosha, when I experience the content, when I experience that this is enough, this is great, I'm fine as it is. So my experience is filtered a little bit differently, maybe. But
while we're waiting for the next contribution, you reminded me, I had a previous career in technology, and the thing about computers, the central processing unit, the CPU, it only does one thing at a time. And it turns out our brains are very much like that. So this process of just narrowing the focus down from all the sounds around you to just the sound of your breath, perhaps, or just the sound of a hum in the room, just bringing it down, narrowing it down. It's like the computer operates a lot better when you're not running 10 things at once.
Renee, the name that you chose, Still and Moving Center, it is very much that. When we are still is when we can truly move in a centered way. If we are not still, we cannot move in a centered way. We move in an erratic way. And if life is a process, then that process of moving needs to be based on something. And so the example that's often used is a wheel and the fulcrum, right? The fulcrum the center never moves, the hub never moves. The wheel moves. But the wheel can't exist without the hub. And so if our center is that hub, then our movement will be in sync. Our movement will be symmetrical. Our movement will be beneficial because it will take us. The process will happen. We will move forward. But we will move forward only because we have a center that remains. The more that we can remain centered, the more that we can move. The more that we can grow, the more that we can learn.
Sometimes I just, I feel as if sometimes we feel that there must be something wrong with me if I'm having these problems. Like, why aren't I tapping into my inner well all the time? Yeah, I must be doing something wrong. I must be wrong. I must, and then we get into more of that whole worry mode.
Well,
I'm
one
not
way,
perfect.
yeah, one way to look at it is I must be doing something right, that I'm aware of my distance. Most people are never aware of it. The fact that you're aware of it means I must be doing something right.
Well, we're at the top of the hour and we could probably go on for another hour.
Oh, thank you, David. Yes, I just saw that. Uh, uh,
Well,
are you offering to give our vote of thanks here, David, at this point?
I would love to.
Okay.
Always love Ramdas's immense wisdom on the topic that I so thoroughly adore. Was particularly just enchanted when you suggested, I think it was, to be enlightened is to be in love with every moment.
Yeah.
And what a gift you've given us today. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I think we all really can relate to that feeling of gratitude to you, Ramdas. And, just always the bringing of your past experience into our present, as well as your present experience, and weaving those so beautifully together is really valuable for us.
It's a part of the process of growth. I'm growing with each moment. So then all of you become a part of my growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for that, thank all of you. Thanks to all of you.
Yeah. Mahalo, mahalo, Ramdas. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you to all of you.